Hello guys and gals, and welcome. It's currently day 6 of Diablo 4, or day 2 of the official launch, and my Necromancer is doing really good. I have managed to improve him significantly from previous versions, and my first video was basically just me having fun playing around with the game, and now I'm in a position where I'm doing a hell of a lot better. So I'd like to go over my build and then, show you practical application of it in game. So basically, how does my build work? First off, I utilize Decompose specifically for the ability to generate corpses, along with the slow. I may actually take that point out because I actually have a new slow now, and I don't necessarily need that one anymore, but it's nice to have that for bosses. Also, Decompose helps with the corpse generation when things get, a little spicy. I have grabbed the Unliving Energy passive, and this is specifically because of the essence bonuses that I'm getting from various pieces of equipment. Honestly, though, this one is one of those things that's just like, I can't quite make up my mind on the last couple points. I keep flipping and flopping between things like Death and Brace, which gives me a little bit of tankability, Death's Reach, which gives me more distant damage, and things like that. And I just, I'm really kind of like suffering on these last couple points on where to put them, but the last couple points aren't really that important. I have Bone Spear maxed out, so 5 ranks in Bone Spear, and I am utilizing the Enhanced Bone Spear, which breaks into 3 shards, and I'm also utilizing the Paranormal Bone Spear, which allows the Bone Spear to have 5% critical strike chance. If Bone Spear's primary projectile critically strikes, it fires 2 additional bone shards upon being destroyed. I'm also utilizing the Hewed Flesh passive, which is a 12% chance to create corpses at the target's location, double that against bosses, and this is actually very important to my specific build because it gives me a very large percent chance to just spawn corpses naturally. As you can see, I currently have a 60% lucky hit chance, and if we pull up a calculator real quick, I can tell you exactly what my lucky hit chance is of spawning corpses. So right now I have a 60% lucky hit chance on my ability, so that's 0.60 times the percent chance here, which is 12, so that will be 0.12, which is going to give me a 7.2% chance without my lucky hit bonuses, which I do believe I actually have a pretty large amount of lucky hit bonuses. Lucky hit chance bonus 19.9%. So we are looking at times 1.19, which is our 19%, and you always add the 1 with this calculation, this part of the calculation, which gives us an 8.5% chance for dishing out damage to generating corpses, which is important to this particular build. Now, against bosses, that chance is obviously doubled, so instead of it being, 7.2, we can take our 0.6 and we can multiply that by 0.24 instead, and then multiply that by our 1.19, which gives us our 17.136% chance, which is pretty darn good against bosses, which means that pretty much anytime we shoot at the bosses, we're going to have at least 1 or 2 corpses form underneath his feet on a regular basis. Now, this build also utilizes other things, obviously, besides Bone Spear, and things like Skeleton Warrior Mastery to keep my skeletons alive. We also utilize the Grim Harvest passive, which is absolutely important to this particular build because we are constantly consuming corpses either to resurrect our minions or to also use our corpse explosions. And every single time we utilize any ability whatsoever that consumes a corpse completely, we are able to generate essence that way, and that is a very important one. We also have the Fueled by Death passive, which gives us a 9% increased damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse, so we get a nice little bonus as long as we are constantly consuming corpses. And then I also utilize the Corpse Explosion ability, which is maxed out. This is currently at rank 8 with my plus to skills. I am using the Corpse Explosion radius increase, and I'm also utilizing the Corpse Explosion deals 8% increased damage to enemies that are slowed, stunned, or vulnerable, because I have an ability to make all monsters vulnerable. It's definitely something that I'm doing, and also slowed as well. I haven't taken any of the curses, and it's really just because I don't have the space, not because I don't want to. I really would like to take a curse, but I just don't have the space in this particular build. I am, however, taking the Skeleton Mage Mastery so that the Skeleton Mages stay alive. Then I am grabbing Corpse Tendrils. Now, I've fought with myself over whether I need to beef this up to its maximum or not. The main thing that you get from beefing it up to its maximum is a cooldown reduction, and I'm not entirely sure I want to spend all those points just for a couple, like, I think it's like literally like 2 seconds of cooldown reduction. It's not like super ridiculous, but basically if I pull the enemy points out of unliving energy and throw those into Corpse Tendrils instead, see I go down to like 8.6 from 10. I mean, the damage goes up a little bit, but I've been fighting with myself over this one on whether or not I really need that. However, I do got the passives, which is enemies who are in range of Corpse Tendrils are slowed by 50% before being pulled in. So we got a nice slow coming from Corpse Tendrils, which is pretty eminently spammable. And then on top of that, I also have the enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils are made vulnerable for 3 seconds. I did want to go with the Blood Orbs one because I'm not really a Blood Necromancer, and also this gives me a way to make everything vulnerable on the entire screen. I also have the Necrotic Carapace, which when I got to World Tier 4, one of the biggest things that was an issue for me wasn't damage output, it was staying alive. And basically what this does is if you throw 3 points in here, you just always have max Fortify. I might actually be able to take some points out of this because I feel like I'm just always maximum fortified. Like, I could probably pull 1 point out and throw it into Corpse Tendrils so it's maxed out completely. But it definitely is a very nice one. Even just 1 point, I think, is crucial for any build that is utilizing corpses. Then I am using Bone Spear, so I'm going into the Bone passives, and I have the Serration ability, which increases the critical strike chance for each 10 essence you have upon cast. The Compound Fracture, which is after critically striking 10 times with Bone Skills, your Bone Skills deal 15% increased damage for 5 seconds. The Evulsion ability, which makes it so that my Bone Skills deal a massive amount of more damage to vulnerable enemies, which is absolutely excellent for this particular build. And as you can see, I have 3 ranks in all of those. I did avoid the Rapid Ossification because I don't really think I need that one. Maybe I might spend 1 point into it, I don't know, but we'll see. The only real cooldown that I have is the next ability that I'm going to show you, which is Bone Storm. Now, why Bone Storm over Army of the Dead or Blood Wave? The reason why is because it has this massive 20% crit bonus while Storm is active. This allows me to get some pretty ridiculous crit damage off while I'm using this ability. Not only that, I can also get a 15% damage reduction from Bone Storm while Bone Storm is active. And on top of that, I also have an ability that allows me to generate a barrier of 5% of my life for basically 10 seconds. So every single time I hit somebody, I get 5% barrier, 5% barrier, 5% 5% barrier, 5% barrier, 5% barrier, and it's absolutely amazing. I actually have taken Blood Mist off my bar completely because Bone Storm honestly keeps me alive pretty much whenever I need to. Then I also have the passives for keeping alive my minions. The minions are no use if they're dead. So this particular passive here, the Death's Defense passive, which is your minions cannot lose more than 30% of their maximum life from a single damage instance, allows the minions to survive more often than not when they wouldn't. And this is really important because it just makes it so that, you know, if a boss uses some big giant hit and tries to wipe out your entire army, well, he can't. 30% damage, this has actually got buffed recently, by the way, but 30% of their maximum life means that so that monsters get hit for 30%, and even if they get hit for 30% again, that's only 60, and if they get hit for 30% again, that's only 90, which means that they still have 10% of their life left, even if they get hit 3 times for 30% of their life in each instance, which means that they can technically survive 3 hits and will die to the 4th, which means that they will more often than not live longer in really rough confrontations. Long enough at least for you to resurrect more, which is certainly nice. I also have 1 point in the Bonded Essence, which gives the Skeletal Priest a little bit of an extra healing amount every 5 seconds, which is kind of decent. I was using the Inspiring Leader, but eventually I kind of moved away from that because I am more of a Bone Necro than anything else. I was originally using Kalen's Edict for the, again, to increase my minions, but I realized that my Bone Spear is really my main skill, and so now I'm utilizing the Ossified Essence, which is your bone skills deal 1% increased damage for each point of essence you have upon cast. Now, the passive is actually enhanced by this, which is the Ossified Essence key passive also increases critical strike damage of your bone skills by 1% per essence above 50, up to 59%. So this is how I'm increasing that passive even further. And I guess I should probably go over my equipment. So I have increased maximum skeletal mages by 2. I have the armor bonus, which is helping me tremendously to stay alive in World Tier 4. It's a perfect roll, so it's pretty darn sweet. I have rubies in all my equipment to increase my maximum life. As you can see, I'm at 3.9k maximum life right now. I'm utilizing the deal 16% increased damage while you have an active barrier, and the barrier, of course, is coming from my Bone Storm ability. And then I also have the each time Bone Storm damages an enemy, you gain barrier equal to 5% of your base life for 10 seconds. These are actually not my boots. These are my boots. Every 10 seconds, your cold skeletal mages cast a blizzard that deals pretty nice cold damage and continuously chills enemies for 8% over 6 seconds. This is actually very key to the build because it allows me to stagger bosses, all sorts of monsters ridiculously easy, because I currently have a total of 5 mages, which I could bring up to 6 if I really wanted to. And those mages will constantly cast these blizzards on the target, dishing out lots of chilling damage, which eventually ends up in freezing damage, which causes massive amounts of stagger to bosses, and it is absolutely amazing. I'm also utilizing the mages specifically for their essence regeneration here, which is each time your cold mages attack their primary attack, you gain 2 essence. So you get a very nice essence generation from the 5 mages as well, because they're attacking constantly, and you're getting 2 essence times 5, which is 10 essence per attack cycle, which is pretty darn good. Then we move on to the weapon. I'm utilizing the imprinted gain 19% increased critical strike chance for 6 seconds when you cast Corpse Tendrils. You deal 57% increased bonus critical damage when enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils. So basically, this allows me to utilize Corpse Tendrils for pretty massive damage increase, and we'll go over that in a minute. I also have bonus primary. Bone Spear's primary attack makes enemies vulnerable, and also the Bone Shards from the Spear deal 90% increased bonus damage to vulnerable enemies. And then I also have the Ring of the Umbral, which is restore 3 of your primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. Now, my crowd control is coming from my Corpse Tendrils, which slows everything for that duration. And then finally, I also have the increased number of skeletal warriors. So I've got the increased skeletal mages and the increased warriors. The warriors are set up to make me corpses. My whole entire build is based around corpses, so using the Reapers have a 15% chance to carve flesh off the enemies is absolutely excellent for this build. However, on occasion, when I come to really difficult content, I will switch over to the Skeletal Defenders. With the every 6 seconds, your Skeletal Defenders negate the next instance of direct damage that they would take. This allows the Skeletal Defenders to stay alive a lot longer than the Reapers would in very difficult situations. Now, as for my Paragon board, I chose for my first Paragon board the legendary node that allows me to have the Flesh Eater ability, which is consuming 5 corpses, grants a 40% damage increase for 6 seconds. I've also grabbed most of the rare nodes on the way up, things like 20% damage, 4% life, 8% resistances, maximum life, things like that. These rare nodes are kind of hard to pass up with the 200 armor, the 20% damage, and 10 intelligence. So forth and so on. The first glyph that I chose is actually the Dex glyph with the core skills deal 4% increased critical strike damage, and critical strikes deal 22% increased damage to enemies while they are not healthy. I still need to grab the extra Dex for this requirement. And then on top of that, I ended up going with the legendary node over here, which is Bone Graph. Hitting enemies with bone skills increases your damage by 1% and your maximum essence by 3 for 8 seconds, stacks up to 8% and increased damage and 24 maximum essence. And then, of course, this one as well, which is 2% critical strike chance with bone skills, 4% healing. And then I'll be able to get this one with the willpower, but another 2% critical strike chance with bone skills if requirements are met. Now, basically, how this works, how this entire build works, is it revolves around the minions dishing out their damage and creating corpses. I also create corpses with my skills, but for the most part, the corpses are the key to this build. Corpse Explosion and the ability to resurrect or heal my minions is how I generate essence, so I usually utilize that for essence generation, not Decompose. Decompose is actually only there to jumpstart the engine if I completely run out of corpses. Corpse Tendrils is the main ability that I use before a big damage bump, and Bone Storm also. Now, I will say about Bone Storm is I do intend to eventually retrieve one of my effects that I have unfortunately lost recently, but I'm trying to get myself another one, which is the effect that increases the duration of Bone Storm, because it has a huge effect on this particular build. Because the longer Bone Storm lasts, the better that 20% crit is being put to use. And once I have everything all together, as you can see, I'm only at 5,591, but once I have everything all together, once I start attacking the monsters, once I start getting my corpse explosions running and my corpse tendrils running, and I actually start dishing out my damage, what you're going to notice is that I have a massive amount of attack power that continues to increase with every single corpse that I explode. And as you can see, I'm currently at 10,136 attack power, which is pretty nice. This is World Tier 4, by the way. So let's have a little bit of fun murdering things in World Tier 4. Now, the key to this build is to get all the monsters nice and bundled up. You want them to be as bundled up as possible when you start your attack rotation, so that you're attacking as many monsters as you possibly can. And Corpse Tendrils is how you do that. So you're going to use your Corpse Tendrils to get them all nice and bundled up, and then once you've got them all nice and bundled up, then you're going to murder them. To generate your essence whenever you need to, you're going to utilize your corpses as necessary. Corpse Explosion also comes in handy here, so anytime that you need to dish out additional damage that way. If you're empty on your essence, basically whenever you've completely utilized all your essence like this, you're going to start utilizing your Corpse Explosion. Corpse Explosion also works. Any corpses that are not within the field of battle, that are outside the field of battle, you're going to utilize those with the skeletal healing or to resurrect your minions. This way, you're always actively doing something to utilize the corpses around you in a manner which is helpful to you. Either you're healing your army with them, you're resurrecting your army with them, or your corpse exploding, which all three are absolutely necessary for this build, because it generates massive amounts of essence, which you can then use to dish out massive amounts of damage with your Bone Spear. Utilizing your cooldowns, you can get some pretty crazy damage numbers, and it really makes everything work out. So basically, you need one corpse first. That's generally the starter for this. You pop down your corpse tendrils, put your Bone Spear up, you fire off your Bone Spears, and everything dies. And it's absolutely glorious. Now, the real beauty of Corpse Tendrils is that Corpse Tendrils is spammable every 8.23 seconds, which is amazing. And you can get that down further with cooldown reduction and things like that. But basically, it hits almost everything on the screen. If you actually kind of watch the ability, the circle is about this big. It's kind of ridiculous. And everything within that circle is slowed, made vulnerable, and pulled in. And this is the absolute key to this, because Bone Spear, when you fire it, does one pulse. Then it comes back with 3, and if it crits, it actually comes back with 5, right? So if you have all the monsters nice and tightly packed in a little ball when you fire your Bone Spear, your initial Bone Spear is going to travel through, and it's going to hit every monster just about, except for the ones on the fringes. Then, when the 5 hits come back on the reverse side, and they dish out massive amounts of damage because of the 90% of damage bonus to monsters that are vulnerable, you're going to get a very large damage bump. And even against single monsters like this, as you can see, it does surprisingly well. Now, I've had a lot of fun playing around with this particular build, and I've beefed up his survivability quite a lot. As you can clearly see from my character right now, I have a beefed up Fortify. The more corpses that I use, or the more corpses that are generated, the higher the Fortify goes. And because I'm using the Hewed Flesh passive, which is the corpse generator we were talking about at the beginning of the video, I'm utilizing the minions, which hew their own corpses. My Fortify is constantly going up. You can pretty much just see the Fortify constantly rising. And unfortunately, I did take some points out and not cap it out. So let's bring that back, because I do actually love having the maximum Fortify. I think it's one of the best things about this build, because the Fortify also means that I get huge amounts of additional overpower damage whenever I do overpower. So it's just another way that I can increase my damage just a little bit further, because not only am I getting massive amounts of critical damage, not only am I getting massive amounts of effects that are giving me huge damage bonuses. As you can clearly see here, my crit at the moment is currently 52.8% chance, up to 71.8% crit, which pretty much means that I am always critting. I'm pretty much always critting. I can't say that obviously 100% would be always, but with Bone Spear, the way that Bone Spear works, because it travels through the targets and then travels back, each cast of Bone Spear at 71% crit is basically guaranteed to crit. I will get one crit out of all of the monsters that I hit with either the initial or the blowback. And this character plays very much like a Javazon in Diablo 2 Resurrected. If you've ever played a Javazon in Diablo 2 Resurrected, it's almost identical. The goal of this is to group up all your monsters just like a Javazon would, fire your javelin into the monsters, have those additional projectiles come out, and then dish out even more damage to the pack. And it works out absolutely beautifully, because the damage output is kind of ridiculously insane. Here we have a group right here. I'm going to go ahead and suck them in. We're going to murder them all. And just like that, they're all nice and dead. And as you can see, even the monsters on the edges aren't really too difficult to deal with. Now, there is obviously more difficult content than World Tier 4 regular dungeon, but I just wanted to give you a practical showing of how this character works. Now, what kind of stats would you focus on for this kind of a build? I think this is also important to talk about. One of the things that I focus on is critical strike chance. As you can see from this ring, I have vulnerable damage, critical strike chance, crowd control damage, and physical damage. So Bone Spear is actually a physical damage spell, and the physical damage bonus from the ring actually gives me a pretty considerable bump. This is a huge increase in my damage output. But as you can see, none of these modifiers, the vulnerable damage, the crit damage, the crowd control damage, not even the physical damage, show up on my attack power. A lot of this stuff, or rather attack power itself, isn't really like the most helpful gauge in the world for how well you're doing on your character. Instead, what you really want to look at is, like, how well are you actually doing? I think it's the best way to do it, is how well am I actually doing with this particular character. If I can clear World Tier 4 content with ease, then I would assume that means I'm doing pretty well. And as I do higher dungeons, like Nightmare Dungeons and things like that, I've actually been getting more and more accustomed to the way that this particular build works, which is, I hate to say that's what she said, but suck them in and knock them down. Like, that's pretty much the way this build works. Suck them in, knock them down. I think the Conduit Shrine does less damage than I do now. Which is kind of sad when you think about it. Let's do the boss fight real quick for just a practical example, because I did talk about the staggering effect of this particular character and how well he is able to stagger bosses. So I think it's important to talk about the staggering effect as well. These guys. I always hate fighting these guys. I hate fighting them because you got to get within the shield. It's really annoying to have to be inside that shield, because as a caster, like specifically as a caster, I don't like being within that shield. It's very dangerous to be within that shield, as you can clearly see by the fact that I died. But let's go kill him anyway. Oh, stay away from the frickin' fire enchantment. That stuff will kill you. The fire enchantment death stuff. Oh man, that stuff's raunchy. Killed basically my whole army there. Alright.
I need more time.
I'm waiting for my cooldown to come up. Oh wow.
I need more time.
This guy's got a clone of himself. This is the first time I've seen this. It's a mechanic that I've never encountered before. He seems to be making a clone of himself, and then immediately just like using two abilities at the same time, almost like the shadow clone ability on the rogue. That's actually pretty neat, and honestly quite deadly. It's very deadly, as you can see. I'm embarrassing myself, boys. I'm embarrassing myself. Alright, now that I got my cooldown up, let's go. Woo! He is a spicy meatball. As you can see, having your cooldown up for this particular ability, or this particular build, is kind of important. So I am going to be working at ways to increase my Bone Storm duration. I actually did have that legendary effect, but unfortunately I need to get it back. The other ways is to reduce the cooldown of Bone Storm, which I'll be exploring ways to reduce the cooldown of Bone Storm as well, because Bone Storm is absolutely crucial to the way that this particular build works. Let's go kill Mr. Big Bossy Pants, and then we'll call this a video. A lot of the times in World Tier 4, when the monsters are that ridiculous and they can pretty much just one-shot you no matter what your defenses are, a lot of the times it's kill or be killed. Yes, they're going to kill you, but kill them faster before they kill you. That's the best way I can explain it. Kill them before they kill you. That's
I need more time.
a lot of the times the only thing you can do with bosses like that are just absolutely ridiculous. And that's not really a boss, that's an elite. And honestly, more often than not, I find that the elites are actually way more ridiculous than the bosses. I don't know what it is. I don't know if they just completely failed in making the bosses like overly difficult. But for the most part, with the exception of the Capstone boss, which was an absolute pain in my butt, the level 70 Capstone boss, I haven't had much trouble with just about any bosses. They've all been relatively weak by comparison to the elites. As you can see, I'm not having any trouble with any of these monsters. But the bosses have all been relatively weak, considerably, compared to the elites, which I found to be kind of disappointing. I feel like they need to beef up quite a large number of the bosses and give us a little bit more challenge on them. Because specific roles of the elites are so much more powerful. They are so much more powerful than the freaking bosses themselves. What the hell is this? Is this where I'm supposed to go?
I'm not ready yet.
I guess this is where I'm supposed to go. Sorry guys, I've never done this dungeon before. I just wanted to give you guys an example of how my character was running, and it seemed like a dungeon would be a good place to go. I was pretty sure that the boss was up next. Looks like we got a pretty big beefy boy up ahead here, so let's start out with a Bone Storm. We're going to use our ability here. Holy walls. Did you see all those walls around me? Good lord, how many walls do you need, buddy?
I need more time.
Alright, let's resurrect the army real quick. Unfortunately, we got to get in the barrier with this guy. which is never fun.
I need more time.
There's a couple modifiers, by the way, since we're talking about elites at modifiers, that is really bad. One of the ones that's been like really nasty for me is the barrier plus the poison one, where literally he has the poison around him in a circle the same size as the barrier. So you have to get in the barrier and you have to stand in the poison to dish out any damage to him at all. And it's oh my god, it's just absolutely insane. Because you've got to you basically have to pop a cooldown to go in there and actually dish out damage to him. Like, because not only is he going to be hitting you, but the poison is just draining your life away into nothingness, and it's beautiful. Oh, hello, big boy. You making some noise, my big boy? No, you're not. You died in like 2 seconds, and that was pathetic. One thing I do want to add some into this is a little bit of life sustain. I was thinking about that. I'd like to have some way to regenerate some HP, and I'm playing around with various ideas on that. Blood orbs, maybe. I don't know. Life after kill could be interesting. Just ways that I could just have like a passive regeneration, just in general, could be interesting. Ooh, frozen. That happens from time to time. The unfortunate side effect of me taking Blood Mist out of this build is that I no longer have it unstoppable, which has been a little bit of an issue. I'm not exactly sure if I want to bring Blood Mist back in or find another way to become unstoppable, but in situations like that where you end up frozen, which was really my fault, to be honest. Like, if I'm being perfectly honest, it was my fault because I stood in the freezing effect, and should not do that, obviously. But working in a form of unstoppable into your build is actually very important for this game. Because in those situations where you are frozen, in those situations where you end up, you know, like stuck, feared, dazed, knocked down, whatever it may be that's locking you in place, it's very difficult to obviously dodge effects and stay alive because, well, you're not going to be able to when you're like that. Unstoppable is basically your way to create an opening in that situation so that you can get away. Normally I don't have to, though, because my barrier is usually so good with this particular Bone Storm ability that I can pretty much tank most damage in most situations, which is actually pretty nice. But in that particular situation, I'm pretty sure my Bone Storm was down, the freezing effect hit me, and then, of course, you know, it's pretty much done from there. The monsters just walk up and donk you to death at that point. That boy is spicy. There we go. Whee! Give my mages back. Stagger. Pew. There a boss over there? There is a boss over there. Alright, we've got all the animus we need to move on to the next zone. Let's go kill the boss, shall we? Oh, I almost forgot to talk about one of the most important things. Why a shield over everything else? Why not get more damage output with a better weapon? You know, like a focus or something like that. Well, one of the main things that came to me when I got to tier 4 was that survivability was kind of more important than damage output. And although my damage output is great, putting a focus here would increase that damage output a little bit more. The main problem is that, well, I don't need that damage output to kill all these monsters. As you can see, I can kill the monsters just fine. And having a little bit of extra survivability with the shield is absolutely amazing. Another interesting thing about the shield, which needs to be considered, is that the shield offers an 80% bump in your main hand weapon damage. So what does this mean? Well, this means that if you have a really good main hand weapon, which my weapon totally needs to be redone, you basically get a huge bump in your attack power just for putting on a shield, which means that as you level up, you don't necessarily have to replace your shield all the time, just your main hand weapon. And every single time you replace your main hand weapon, the bonus that's given to you by the shield goes up as well, which makes it a lot easier to level because you don't have to constantly replace 2 weapons to get your damage increased. You only have to replace 1. Now, granted, you do lose a little bit because it's 80% main weapon damage, not 100%. But if your main hand weapon is a lot better than your sub-hand weapon, this means that you still end up with a really nice attack power overall. In general, I just really like the way the shields look. I really like this particular graphic. It's freaking awesome looking. And also, I like the fact that it blocks attacks, and it does actually save me from a lot of damage. So we got the Chief Marauder. What's up, buddy? So first off, I'm going to generate a couple corpses on him. It's the easiest way. And then I'm going to use my abilities. We're going to go ahead and we're just going to annihilate him out of existence, as you can see. That's a tier 4 boss. Not a tier 4 nightmare boss, but just a tier 4 boss. And as you can see, I just demolished him. And now you know what I mean by the bosses just seem really weak. They really do. The bosses just seem really weak. Now, granted, in the future, I'm sure I'll come across bosses that are a lot more challenging than this one, but this is not that day. Anyway, thank you for watching my overview for my character on day 6 of Diablo 4. I'm having a blast playing this game, and my overall impression so far is that I am having lots of fun. I really, really enjoy theory crafting characters. If you have never joined me for one of my theory crafts before on Diablo 2 Resurrected, you wouldn't know. But for those of you who have, you know I love theory crafting characters, and this game is all about some theory crafting characters. And I would actually caution all of you guys not to look up build guides and things like that, because to be honest with you, half the fun of this game is just having fun theory crafting characters and coming up with cool builds and doing interesting things and testing things out. I mean, it's a brand new game and nobody really knows exactly what the most optimal build is right now. And for all you know, you could be running it if you came up with it yourself. A lot of people within my kinship have come up with some very interesting builds for Diablo 4, and this is just my Necromancer. I am sure that over time I will refine him even further, and as I level up closer to level 100, I will get even more abilities that will allow me to focus my damage and my survivability even better. But as of right now, this is the state of things. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.